Welcome everyone to the Deeper Insights webinar series from Tech Canada. My name is Ruth Ann Marley and it is always my pleasure to host these weekly webinars. This webinar will be recorded, so if you would like to review it again or to show it to your teams or to your tech group, you are more than welcome to do so. You will find it hosted on our Tech Canada website. As always, we invite you to type in your questions and comments to the speaker in the question box. Emile and I will leave some time at the end and I will read out your questions and we'll get going with that right away. So today it's my pleasure to introduce to you Emile Studham. Emile is a driving force beyond innovation and inspiration, and he has started his own company, Performance by Design. And Emile and I have had a kind of a touch and go contact over the last couple of years, as Emile spends half of his time down in Australia. And as you know from some of the information about this webinar, is he's very involved in Aussie rules football, but he's also deeply involved in a Toronto-based company called Aussie X. And he's going to talk a little bit about the impact and some of the performance work that he's been doing by Performance by Design. You're going to enjoy Emile. He is very charismatic, he's fun-loving, he's just kind of a unique individual with a fascinating passion and a coaching presence. So Emile, I'm going to turn it over to you right now and you can just take us away. Welcome, Emile.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ruth Ann. Great to be here, everyone. Very funny to talk into a camera when I'm used to talking to faces at least, but look, we're going to take you through a series of sections today and really try and make everything as practical, simple and practical as possible so that you can take away the tools and strategies that we use inside the professional sports world as well as the corporate space. And also I've laced questions throughout the presentation, and I've also got a cheat sheet that I'm going to be sending to Ruth Ann after the session based on a few of your questions and based on the section around yourself and managing your own individual state and performance. But let's get straight into it. So, look, the reality, ladies and gentlemen, is that remote is here to stay. The new research and the studies show very clearly that we are going to be working in a hybrid model in the not too distant future, I hope. In Melbourne, where I'm come from, we are still in crazy lockdown. Things are not great there. Everyone's working from home. You can't leave your house after 8 p.m. or before 5 a.m. It's not a great state, but the research, especially out of Harvard, is showing us that we can expect that our workplace will be blended and remote. So when we look at that at Performance by Design, we look at opportunity. And I watched Gary Maxwell's talk way back, I think in March when COVID, or April when it first hit, and he introduced me to this concept in Chinese language, that crisis is the combination of opportunity and danger. And we look at it as an opportunity. Look at these young fellas, eh? Helping each other out through crisis. So in today's webinar, I'm going to talk a little bit about, and we're going to answer 3 fundamental questions and place questions into the session that you can take away, okay? How do we have to lead through change and transition, especially through such uncertain and confusing times? We've gone through some pretty hectic times. We don't know what's moving forward. It's confusing, it's unsafe, we're insecure. As leaders, we need to create safety for our teams to perform. We'll talk a lot about psychological safety today and taking the chance out of your culture. Secondly, what can we learn from professional sports to create a competitive corporate advantage, again, to uncertainty and transition? Irrespective of whether you like sport or not, we can be very respectful to it being a high performance space, and we work extensively through professional sport, particularly through Australian rules football, which is that crazy sport that you may have seen on TSN recently and over the years. And then finally, how do you want to be recognised as a leader post-COVID? We've got some questions there that will really surface what are those behaviours that you need to display through these challenging times, okay? Now, first and foremost, we're big believers in not taking a chance on your culture. The stakes are simply too high right now. But one thing we also know in our journey working with so many corporate teams around the world is it's still a competitive advantage. So many organisations still do not understand what culture really is. There's a misconception around that. And in section 2 today, we'll talk about that misconception in a bit more detail, okay? But as an organisation, as you can see there, we're industry agnostic. We are in the people game. So we are big believers that the internal relationships and the behaviours that you drive, the behaviours that you accept and reward inside of your organisation are key drivers to success. And I've been lucky enough to work all around the world, both Australia, India, North America, here in Canada. And I love this work, so I'm deeply connected to it. And in the professional sports space, a lot in Aussie rules football, a lot in England rugby. And it's just great to work in there. But the interesting thing about working in sport is how much focus we have to develop on our people. We can't buy Salesforce and speed up the speed of our players. We have to grow and develop our people. And that's a competitive advantage we're going to talk a bit about today, and some of those strategies that we use to help build really strong and united teams, okay? My business partners in Australia are quite famous, actually, which is great. Paul Roos, there's a very famous Aussie rules footballer turned professional coach. One of the few that was an absolute legendary player turned legendary coach, and really has changed the game of coaching in Australia to very much an empowerment model, which is what our system is all about. And then Jared on the right-hand side of the screen, he's trying to buy a FA Premier League soccer club in that picture there, unsuccessfully, might I add. He's been my mentor and our business partner for the last 10 years, where he helped me through a very dark period of my life as I was building Aussie X. So that's me on Dragon's Den with 4 bottles of bleach in my hair. That was in 2011. And it's a pivotal picture for me because we did get a deal with Jim Treliving on the show. We took his handshake. We didn't take his money afterwards. It all fell through. But at that point in my life, the business went from 5 to 35, 40 people pretty quickly. And all of my leadership gaps came to the fore. And it was really centered around an inability to empower decision-making and an inability to have an honest conversation with my team. And so when Jared came over, he really took me out of a tough situation back then. And in a lot of ways, my pain has become my purpose. So I'm very honored and I love this and privileged to do this work. I've got a page here, a bit about our results over the last couple of years. I'm not going to bore you with those details. You can check them out just to make sure we are fair dinkum, as we say in Australia. And as I said before, we're very big in the Aussie rules football world. We've had a success the last basically 18 premiers, with 18 last champions of our game have used the performance by design system, okay? So let's dive straight into 3 areas of sport that corporate can learn from. What does sport do well that corporate often miss and we can leverage? Number 1, reviews. Now, Pippa Granger is a person that we follow heavily. She's a lady that is taking the English soccer team over by storm and really recalibrating the way that they think. When we talk about reviews, we're talking about results and behaviour. Now, because sport is played in seasons and games, it's quite easy to review because you basically have to from game to game. What she talks about a lot, though, is culture, and she's a great person to follow because her insights are they're very backed by research and they're very connected to what we do. She talks about culture being not winning. Winning is not a good culture. The two go hand in hand, but are not necessarily causal. Culture doesn't cause winning, but sustained winning is absolutely underpinned by good culture. And when we talk about reviews, we're talking about reviewing performance with results and behaviour, because we can get good results but behave badly. When we look at Google in 2018, 10,000 staff members globally walked out due to poor internal behaviour. But if you look at their results, they're world. So teams that have gone from quite good performance to low because of market trends or people leaving for whatever reason, when we uncover the curtain, we actually reveal they've been doing well financially, but they've been behaving poorly internally. If we want to drive a great, high-performing, healthy culture, we need to keep checking in on are those behaviours getting us what we want, okay? Number 2, sport develops leaders and empowers decision-making very well. We can't have players running in the wrong direction, making the wrong decision on the field. Much like these guys here, we need people to be making smart decisions. And we develop that through strong interpersonal connections and systems to ensure we all know what we have to do in our role. Knowing our role in sport is absolutely imperative, okay? We don't take the chance of people going onto the field not knowing what is the best decision at any given time. And then thirdly, probably the biggest thing that's taught quite well compared to corporate, open and honest communication. And we coin that real talk. We'll talk a fair bit about real talk in section 2 and give you some tools in section 3, bring it to life. We talk about real talk being a 4-to-1 ratio, 4 positive interactions to every 1 negative or constructive. And we talk a lot about right time, right way, right place. Okay, are we having the right conversations with the right people and not deferring over to someone else to grab their attention? The risk of that is immense and a massive culture destroyer. Now, as a result of those 3 areas, ladies and gentlemen, 2 major implications come out of not being able to empower decision-making, have honest conversations, and, as we said before, reviewing performance against behaviour. And one of those is we tend to hire our best individual contributors, expecting them to be great leaders. And unfortunately, I love the great man. When I went to Western University and I got to watch Wayne Gretzky's last game, what a champion, what an unbelievable athlete. But we cannot say he was a great coach, because playing the game and coaching the game are 2 very different things. And if we are not checking in when we review on performance, results, and behaviours, we get stuck in the trap of just promoting our best individual contributors who may not be the best leaders. Second to that, as leaders, we can get stuck in what we call the player-coach syndrome. In professional sport, in any sport, rarely can the coach run on the field and take a pass or a shot for their players. Yet in corporate, that line is blurred. We often take work off of our team. And we often ask leaders under stress, do you trust more or do you take over? Do you jump on the court and take that work off your team like I used to at a rampant rate, basically severing their ability to prove that they can be trusted? And in these challenging times, we have you consider that we need to get you out of that maze and into the chopper, getting up above the business, looking forward at what are the potential gaps that we can expose in the market, what are those new opportunities, and what are those potential roadblocks. If we're stuck in the maze because we can't empower decision-making, okay, we're not going to be able to make those great decisions required to navigate this adversity. And this transition period is going to be key, because we simply may go back into restrictions as well. So we need to be very wary of those structures and systems that are allowing us to get out of the maze and get into that chopper, okay? So let's dive into section 1. And we always, with any presentation we do like this, we start with I. We start with you as the individual leader. 3 sections here. Number 1, we want to talk briefly about managing your state. One of our team members, Shelley Laslett, is a neuroscientist, has been teaching us amazing things about the new research around the way our brain works. She talks a lot about the best decisions are made when the brain is in a alert and relaxed mindset. And how you show up is how your team will feel. Now, I'm not going to go into all the nitty-gritty of the various techniques that you use around box breathing, meditation, drinking water at certain times, vitamins. I've got a cheat sheet for that. I've scoured the net. I use a lot of different things on myself. I test different vitamins, different strategies, different tools, different mechanisms to get myself into an alert and relaxed state. So I put that into a cheat sheet for you that you can take away, and Ruth, and you will pass that through to the network here. But the challenge that we'd like to present to you with that cheat sheet, let's do this, okay? When you get that cheat sheet, be a role model leader. Choose one ritual or strategy from that sheet to integrate into your daily routine. Now, a hint there would be to start off with choosing one from the morning list first. The way we start our day has a direct correlation to the success of the rest of it. So I've got some tips and tricks about the first 20 minutes of your day and why we need to drink water, Himalayan pink salt, apple cider vinegar, a few things like that will really help us start the day in that positive mindset. I won't carry on anymore about that because that's a takeaway for you. But please do remember, one of the things that we too far consistently see around leadership is leaders expecting their team to do something but not doing it themselves. So be a role model leader. Take the chance out of your mindset being weak and poor by looking at that cheat sheet and taking action. And the challenge is just to do one ritual. Get that into your system and then have it stacked on top of that, okay? Secondly, leaders. One of the most important things, and it's even more imperative now as we manage this uncertainty because our team are feeling more insecure and unsafe than ever before, is we need to understand that we are the owners of creating an environment for others to perform. So setting the structures to create safety for our team is absolutely imperative. Section 3 today will dive into some strategies that we're using with other organisations to give you some tools and tricks to do moving forward. But we know from all of the research, Dan Coyle's 4-year study, if you are into culture and want to learn more, this bloke wrote our book. When we got this book, we passed it around to our team. We got into WhatsApp and we said, the bugger has written our book, The Culture Code. It's absolutely brilliant. Dan Coyle has a very big gift in creating thousands and thousands of words and putting it into a very succinct format. His 4-year study, Psychological Safety Wins. Project Aristotle with Google, 2-year study on what creates great winning teams. Psychological safety underpinned it all. Now, what's really important to note around psychological safety is that emotional and physical pain to the brain is the same. Emotional and physical pain to the brain is the same. So as leaders, it is our job to keep creating safety, to enable that real talk so that our team can start to self-manage, empower decision-making so you can get up into that chopper more often than not and out of that maze, okay? So some role model recommendations we have for you here. As far as building psychological safety, Amy Edmondson's research out of Harvard is extremely clear. Call it out. If something is not working and we all know and are feeling it as a leader, do not hide it. Don't let that elephant in the room remain there. We're all thinking it. As individuals inside of a team, if a leader avoids that tough conversation and doesn't call it out and bypasses what's actually really happening, it's clear in her research and in our experience that it increases anxiety within the team. And we're feeling that a lot with our politicians, particularly in Australia. We're not happy with the way they're communicating because they're not calling out even themselves, okay? Furthermore, explain your decisions as they arise. We cannot over-communicate through this period. Over and over again with our leaders, both here in North America and Australia, we're consistently looking at little and often structures to increase that communication, increase that safety. And now, ladies and gentlemen, more than ever before, it's time to use our values when we make decisions. We're going to talk a lot about that in the following section. 2 great questions from Amy's research I'd like to share with you to elicit that conversation and get that information out of your team. A big threat to our performance as leaders is not having enough information to make good, powerful decisions. At the end of the session today, I'm going to talk about a tool that we have called Performance Connections that really helps elicit conversations and eliminates that hiding of information. It's a massive threat to our performance right now. 2 questions we'd recommend. Has anyone have a different perspective here? What might we be missing? Further to that, if you have a quiet team of introverts, we're going to talk about profiling in a second, we would challenge you to consider asking pointed questions. Don't let the team fence sit through this period. We need them to speak up. We need to have that safety, to have that real talk, so we can make good, powerful decisions with that alert and relaxed mindset, okay? And another way to elicit and create psychological safety is to do often the opposite of Mr. Trump here. Love him or hate him, his response is not great as a leader. His attack on people when he gets some criticism is not what we want to role model as leaders in this environment. So one tool that you can use, irrespective of the feedback or information you are receiving, simply say thank you. Because what that does is it gives you space to move into and time to keep that alert and relaxed mindset. You might get the worst news possible, but how you react will contribute to the team's ability, obviously, to speak up later when something else is not working. Okay? I often talk about a metaphor of a vase. You know, if this is a vase here, we want our team to come to us with cracks in the vase, as opposed to wait until it's smashed all over the floor and in millions of pieces. We can't afford to have those vases everywhere. We need to be able to fix the vase in a situation like that is fixable. And then finally, in relation to psychological safety, little and often is what takes the chance out of your connection. Belonging cues, we love belonging cues. Little and often positive interactions, a little bit more difficult. We have to be more creative now that we're working a lot remote. But belonging cues tell our team members that we're safe and connected and we have a future together. Don't blow this out of the water in relation to that connection piece. Little and often is the mantra we push on and sell, if you will, to all of the leaders that we work with. Lots of short, energetic exchanges. Space matters when we do work together. That's why Google spends so much time figuring out how do we make people collide. Google AdWords, that was created in the kitchen when Larry Page challenged a group of individuals, calling out their AdWords as being terrible and no good. People took that on, but the interaction mattered in the kitchen, in those environments where we can connect, little and often creating that safety. It's interesting, but the research from Michael Bungay-Staniers of the Coaching Habit reveals that the brain looks for danger 5 times per second. Belonging cues are the antidote to that insecurity and unsafety. Okay. Now, physical touches, fist bumps, high fives. Can't do them now, but can you do them virtually? We've got some clients that are actually running just humour sessions. They catch up every 2 weeks for 25 to 30 minutes. It's someone's job to show a funny video and they just chat about it and they just connect through laughter and humour. They put the tools down and just simply connect for 30 minutes every 2 weeks, okay? Attentive listening, small attentive courtesies, high on content. If you are on a call with your team, please put your videos on. Please put your videos on. Demand that from your team, okay? Because we also know that in high-performing teams, there is a high ratio of positive feedback and interactions. 4 to 1 is the research. Research has shown that more high fives in a basketball game, the more chances of winning. So a question to chin stroke later. It'll be in the document in the handout. What are you doing with your remote teams to integrate belonging cues into your day-to-day, week-to-week rhythms to ensure your remote teams don't feel isolated? We are going to be remote, doesn't mean we have to feel isolated. And of course, consider your clients. I have one particular client, actually one of my guys here at Hydro One has a little list on his notes of the 7 to 10 most important people in his network inside of Hydro One. His alarm goes off as he gets into his car to drive to his little office that he has himself. The alarm goes off, he goes to his notes, he looks at the next person, he calls that person, and that is one of the ways he's integrating belonging cues into his week-to-week, day-to-day routines, okay? The third thing I want to talk about in relation to you as an individual leader, understanding individual differences. I'm not going to take too long here, but I do want to stress the point that if you are a leader of a team, which I believe you all are, understanding the world of profiling, understanding yourself and using a profiling tool is almost essential to you being the leader that you need to be for your team. It increases our levels of self-awareness, it allows us to recognize the gifts in individuals, and it allows us to apply effective communication strategies because we see the world not as it is, but as we are. And the tool that we use is Profiles. It's very similar to that of DISC, and we look through it. We look at very introverted, analytical type, cool blue owls. We look at the earth green introverted feelers, the doves, great team players, tranquil, still and soothing. Sunshine yellow peacocks, uplifting. We love those guys because they bring a good positive energy to the room. And the fiery red eagles, they're bold and assertive, they're extroverted doers. Understanding the fundamentals of this is really important to being able to communicate well and build those strong internal relationships with your team. Blues tend to like information in writing and they don't like their routine altered. Reds like it to be brief and be bright and be gone and focus on objectives and outcomes. Greens are more relationship oriented, like the yellows. Don't break their routine, don't take advantage of their good nature. They also like a bit of time to feel their way through things, whereas the yellow peacocks, they're pretty cool to have a chat and a yarn at any given time. Understanding first yourself through this profiling lens will then help you understand your team and build those stronger relationships. And what becomes extremely important through these challenging times is, where do we go to under stress? Blues tend to get a bit stuffy and stuck in the details. The reds get a bit overbearing and controlling. Greens tend to move away from conflict and hide and don't want to engage. Yellows, we get all a bit excitable and hasty and make fast decisions when we probably should sit down and behave a bit more like a blue. And so when you look at this quadrant here using the Insights profiling tool, you can see blue and yellow are quite cross-referenced, and red and green. Understanding these communication styles and the team of people that you are leading becomes essential to building those strong relationships and creating that safety and speaking to their listening, if you will. Yeah. Okay. Dave Misson, one of our team members who's also here in Toronto, tells a good story of working with one of his IT guys. Dave was the high performance coach of many AFL clubs for many years, Australian Olympic teams. Couldn't connect with a particular IT guy in one of his team meetings, took him out for a one-on-one. The guy came out of his shell, had millions of fantastic ideas that the group was able to execute. But it wasn't until Dave actually understood that that particular person was a high blue, introverted energy, analytical thinker, and the group environment did not make him feel safe to speak up. Dave used the tool to have a great conversation and build that strong relationship with that individual. Okay. Let's dive into section 2, the key principles of building high-performing cultures, okay? And then section 3, we'll dive into what are we going to do now, okay? Key principles. The first misconception we want to bring to your attention is this misconception that high-performing cultures are one where we all just get along, we have slides in the office, and we just have a heap of fun and get along really well. Truth be told, the best cultures, the most high-performing ones, are quite edgy. There's always this really cool, great by choice, Jim Collins, productive paranoia, because we define culture as the behaviors that we accept and reward of each other, okay? I'll fix up that, my little logo's gone over the other. The behaviors we accept and reward of each other. So as leaders, we're constantly challenging leaders when they see something positive, catch the good. When you see a behavior that is good, catch it. Don't leave it to chance that person does not know that's the right thing to do. And conversely, when something is not the behavior that we want, challenge it. Don't let these small things become big things. We often will coach teams on challenging behavior through asking questions. And again, when we're not sure about the behavior, lean into asking the question. Hey, Sally, can you let us know what you're doing there? Why are you doing it that way? Can we do it a bit better? The better we get at asking questions, the greater we create that safety, and the more real talk comes into our organisation, and the more empowering of decision-making we do as leaders. Another chin stroke question for you. How do you want your new team members to behave? That will give you a pretty good indication of the behaviours that you want to accept and reward of any team member, really. And when I talk about that edginess in those great cultures that we work with, both sport, corporate, not-for-profit, it doesn't matter. There's this swinging, the performance pendulum, we like to nickname it, that fine balance between care and support and challenge and accountability. And it's interesting to understand how resilience works in the space here. When people are down, we often think we need to give them a bit of a push to get them back up. Our research and our experience shows us that when a person's down, it's time to give them a hug and show care and support, but make sure they reflect through that pain. And when we want to see new standards and create new results, we actually challenge leaders to consider giving teams and individuals a push when their ego is high and their results are good. It's counterintuitive for a lot of people, okay? But that pendulum is constantly swinging. It's never really still inside of the culture space. You're either doing and living behavior that are driving performance or holding you back. When we look at leadership, we look at leaders as role models. We don't have to be Superman. We don't have to be Wonder Woman. We just have to be clear on the behaviours that we want the rest of our team to display. And we have this great saying, if you do, they will. If you don't, they won't. It's as simple as that. It's not the task at hand. It's not the job role we're talking about. We're talking about those agreed set of behaviours. We'll talk a little bit about creating them in the next section, very coming up. Some questions to ponder and chin stroke after today's session. How do you want to be recognised as a leader post-COVID? A great way to look at that is think about leaders that you love. What are the traits they admire? Can people use those words to describe you? This is really worth pondering, because when you start about the descriptors, you start to then think about, okay, what behaviours and traits must I consider? What behaviours must you elevate? What behaviours must you eliminate? What does your team expect of you? And finally, the accountability question. Who are you going to tell of your answers to these questions? We know that behaviour change is big with another person or a group of people like tech to hold us to account, okay? Some questions for you to ponder taking away. When we talk about high-performing teams, it comes back to safety again. And we define a high-performing team where every team member feels safe to have honest conversations, to have that real talk in a little and often fashion. And we keep coming back to the research, keep catching the good. 4 to 1 positive interactions for 1 negative or constructive or challenging. Catch the good. Take the chance out of your team not understanding what are the right behaviours by catching the good and pushing that down to your managers as well. And when we think about real talk, we want to debunk that term of feedback as being something that is negative or something that's not working. Real talk is predicated on the fact that we want to improve and that we care about each other and the team. Real talk is the 4 to 1 ratio. Real talk is the challenging conversations. Real talk is catching the good. It's all and one are the same. Because ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, we see it as a learned skill. Therefore, it can be practiced. We can put situations and systems in place to practice real talk. And empathy and vulnerability are neurological magnets. They play a huge role in that high performance space of building trust, okay? When we think about trust, we think about team and talent or character and competency, okay? Talented people can do their job and do it well under pressure, but we also need that team aspect, that they'll do what's best for the team under pressure as well. And we talk about that metaphorical trust bank. Keep putting dollars into that trust bank and building those strong internal relationships. The big takeaway as part of today, as we're going to go through section 3, is focusing on your internal relationships as a driver for your external results. It's easy to get stuck in building relationships with externals. Our belief system, or what comes up through our experience, if we get our behavior internally right, our customer service goes with it, okay? They're the key principles, section 3. Let's talk about what can we do now moving forward, the nitty-gritty of the presentation. 3 threats and implications and antidotes to not leave your culture to chance. Number 1, the threat is there's no reference point for having conversations about performance and decision-making. That will show up in your, what we call your culture code, or your purpose, your values and behaviours. If there's no reference point, we're slow to innovate, we have no clear direction. Teams can easily get stuck in arguing, a lack of alignment and a united drive and force. And for us as leaders, that inhibits our ability to get to the chopper. So the antidote is the creation of your culture code or purpose and values and behaviours, however you want to create it. If you have it now, you bring it to life by inserting it into your structures to make decisions. A series of questions we have for you to look at where you are today culturally. How would your team describe itself today? Is it congruent with what you want? What behaviours do you tolerate in your team that are counterproductive? What gets noticed in your organisation and why? And is feedback in your team? Is it given in your team? Is it honest? Is it done face to face? And how do the recipients respond? That's a takeaway section for you. What I want to talk about now is the brilliance of some examples of some famous names and some clients of ours who have brilliantly used their code to make decisions, particularly under stress, which is what we're talking about here. Under pressure, do we make decisions based on our purpose, values and behaviours? 1982, TYLENOL, released by J&J, killed a number of people in Chicago. The pressure from the board came to James E. BURKE, to go, just bring back the tablets that were released to the Chicago public and no one else. He went back to the credo, the organization's purpose. Now, it's long, but credo meant something inside of J&J. Under pressure, he made the big decision to recall 31 million tablets. Huge in 1982, a huge recall, using his purpose, values and behaviors to make tough decisions. ADIDAS and Nike recently, let's have a look at their purpose statements. ADIDAS is to be a global leader in the sporting goods industry with brands built on a passion for sports and sporting lifestyle. Nike, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. P.S. If you have a body, you're an athlete. Making a decision through their code, through their purpose, has created an entire new line of athletic gear for Nike. They now dominate the handicap, disabled Paralympic space of the global market. Boston Pizza, when we worked with them a number of years ago, we helped them create Be Remarkable. We worked with them for a period. They sat with their values. They had 5 different values. We came back 6 months later for a review. The team came back, the marketing team. We got them from all over the country. We were helping them redo their structure from a provincial siloed model to a Canadian United team. I came back and Steve Silverstone said to me, Emile, we just used Remarkable. So they chucked the BP in front of Be Remarkable, and everything was wrapped around that very clear purpose statement. We show up to Be Remarkable. They built a website called BeRemarkableMarketing.com and revealed all of their marketing secrets to the market. And what that's really saying, ladies and gentlemen, is that we're backing in our culture. Here's all of our strategy. Here's all the talent information that we have, but we're going to back ourselves into Be Remarkable. And it was a fantastic experience for them. They share that story with such passion. Here's me good mate, Wazza, back in my hometown, Wonthaggi Medicinal Cannabis Company. Their code, their purpose is trailblazing. This is Wazza at 4 a.m. in the morning, putting together some products to be shipped out to the very pharmaceutical avenues. 4 o'clock in the morning, doesn't have to be there. I asked him, why did you jump into the facility when you had all those workers? He goes, mate, I'm trailblazing. That's what trailblazing looks like to us. Get down and dirty with the team. The dollars that he put in the trust bank and the respect that he got out of that little act of getting in and getting his hands dirty, paid dividends. I talked to Katie, his lady in HR, just the other day, and she said the team just love him more than ever before. Higgins Paints, whatever it takes. I talked to Marcus last night, head of sales. He cannot believe how much impact their purpose statement, their code name is giving them right now. He said, Emile, I don't know what to do with myself. I've got all this time on my hands. I said, mate, that's exactly why we do the work. Understanding what drives us at that very core is extremely important. If you have something in place, we can bring it to light with a couple of strategies that we'll talk about now. If you don't have something in place right now, here are some questions to ponder. Particularly, we would challenge you to consider doing this with your executive team or a high-level leadership team. The higher, the better, and get just something in place, something to stake into the ground during this period that you can use in your vernacular to drive a new level of performance. So the question here, because we know that if a team is doing meaningful work, they push through and drive new results. Why does the team exist? What is unique about us? What is the contribution we want to provide? What is the impact we want to have on those we serve? And a hint, when we start to create and name culture codes or purpose statements or core propositions, whatever words you want to use that aligns the organization, it will often come through sharing stories of customer interaction, okay? Now, they can also be not great stories like we had with Ironman Group and Dave Beach and the executive team. Earn Your Medal has become their purpose statement. I love purpose statements that are under 7 words or less. They've heard a story of people not getting a medal in some of their events. It was only a 5 to 10 kilometre walk. It wasn't an Ironman like this. If you ran after an Ironman and didn't get a medal at the end of it, you'd be pretty unhappy to say the least. And in that moment, sharing those stories of wins and challenges, he banged the table and said, guys, we've got to earn our medal as well. The room went silent. That became their core proposition, their core purpose. Try and find that through here, because this is now the time to dive into those questions that will start to surface why you really exist, and start to share that with the team and use it in your vernacular as much as possible. Number 2, second big threat, a poor cadence of connection. You don't have the systems and structures in place to ensure that the team are connecting in a little and often fashion and building that strong internal relationships. And the threat of that, clearly, guys, is disconnection and loneliness. Again, just because we're remote doesn't mean we have to feel isolated, okay? So the antidote for this, design your accountability and recognition system. Again, we would challenge you to consider as leaders, it's your job to create the environment for others to perform. So PBD recommendations here. Daily huddles at the same time every day. Vern Harnish and the Scaling Up legends are big on the huddles, and so are we. Start the week with team check-ins, where we set intentions and outcomes, and end of week bookends with checkouts. A PBD hint and recommendation as a leader, start to create a weekly Friday afternoon video that you can send around to your team. Dave Beach from the Ironman group swears by this. And when he went through that process, he goes, Emile, I don't feel very comfortable presenting. So we said, let's just chuck the information up on the whiteboard, gathering it from various different team members, and just read off the whiteboard like the image I have there of one of my presentations. Very easy way to get that into your routine. And a simple agenda there, guys. Share wins and highlights from the company, challenges you're working through or have overcome, insights. Share your insights from the top of the organisation. What are you seeing coming down the track? Be honest there. This is a great opportunity to share a part of yourself and become that leader you want to be. Shout outs. And the shout outs, again, ladies and gentlemen, should be connected to results and behaviour. Results and behaviour, marry the two together. Take the chance out of just reviewing our performance and our happiness on results. There's so much learning that comes from reviewing the two together. And the upcoming events and personal announcements, birthdays, parties that are coming up, parties are pretty hard, any announcements with children, anything that you can grab from your managers up 4 to 5 minutes maximum. The dollars in the trust bank and the feedback we're getting from clients doing this is unbelievable. And Wazza, I'll go back to Wazza and give him a shout out again. Not the world's most extroverted individual. Didn't like doing it at the start. Now he's got the kids involved. They're absolutely hilarious, and the team cannot wait for them from week to week. Hammertech, one of our clients, works in both California and Melbourne. They have an all-hands meeting on to connect to the Australian and US team. Ben there, my good mate now, said that he has revolutionised the way they communicate, and they are not going back to anything remotely without this Friday all hands, okay? Build these systems, ladies and gentlemen, please. Your people need you to do that. They need that safety. They want you to personalise your message, and videos and all hands meetings are a very powerful way to do so. Very quickly, high level, structurally, we will challenge you to consider the magic number 7. Build your teams around 7. Navy SEALs have researched the power of that. We work with Flight Centre. I was talking to Millie Harper, the head of sales there the other day. They've gone through obviously horrendous situations, but she and the team account for their success. 1 leader for every 6. As soon as that group gets to 10, they split it to 2 leaders with 5. As leaders, how do we give our attention and our love to our individuals if our teams are too big? And then finally, schedule one-on-one reviews within your organisation, not just you, but your managers as well. And again, a book we would recommend, The Coaching Habit, Michael Bungay-Stanier, absolute champion. I've got a video here, finally, before we go to the last one, then Performance Connections. Michael Schneider is a client of ours in Australia. Bunnings is like the Home Depot of Australia. 1 minute, 30 seconds there. He talks about how they have scaled inclusivity within their systems, and all the changes in their locations has come from information from ground workers, not the war room. Unbelievable. 55,000 team members, Australia and New Zealand, and the solutions have come from the team because of the great trust and that inclusive value that drives everything they do. We have a Culture Couch episode. I highly recommend it. I'll put it into the handout afterwards. That is a great leader who talks about care and inclusivity with passion and love for his team. and you can feel it when you enter those locations in Australia. The #1 trusted brand in all of Australia, okay? And then finally, ladies and gentlemen, number 3, people withholding important information. That is a huge threat. When we feel unsafe, we know a lot of people will go into their shell. As leaders, we need to make sure that there's no fence sitting and that we have the information to make important decisions with the information required as much as we possibly can. Because uncertainty and insecurity breaches our safety. So the antidote for that, we call them performance connections. Facilitate real talks to start your meetings. Reward, challenge, no fence sitting. Here's the process we would recommend. And the feedback and the impact that these performance connections are having is astounding. Choose a number of questions you'd like the team to answer. We recommend 3 to a meeting, no more. Provide time for reflection. 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. The questions might be wins, challenges, insights. If you want to have a specific one, that's fantastic. I can give you a list in the handout. So many questions. Then individuals all share their answers in 1 to 2 minutes per person. If the group is over 7 or 8, we recommend that you split them into 2 into your breakout rooms and then come back in. These, when done well, go for 12 to 15 minutes to begin your meeting. But what they do is prevent people from fence sitting, and it elicits the information that we need as leaders to make the best decisions, identify the patterns and what's really happening inside of our organisation. What are the insights that we're getting? What are the potential roadblocks? Very simple process. Pick your 3 questions, give them a couple of minutes at the start of the session, share individually, grab the patterns, make some decisions together. It develops an underutilized skill and habit of reflecting and knowledge sharing. It increases team buy-in, and people must contribute. You cannot just go, no, I've got no answers. You've been given the 2 to 3 minutes to start the session. It practices that skill of listening and effective communication, which is challenging right now with the remote world. And it's really, we talk about it being the weight training of real talk. Little and often is the key, and that structured time accelerates the relationship building process. And finally, performance connections to begin your team meetings helps you identify patterns of thinking and avoids that group think, okay? Because you've got time on your own and you can't just say, oh, I agree with what the boss said, because you as a leader in that process will speak last, okay? So that's the antidotes, or the 3 threats, the implications of those 3 threats, and 3 different antidotes to help you manage this transition and adversity and this uncertainty through these really interesting times, okay? That's 45 minutes from my clock there, Ruth Ann. Let me put my headphones in.
Thanks, Emile. I'm going to ask people to put in any questions or comments. Emile, you really densely packed that 45 minutes. There was a lot going on there, lots of power, lots of questions, lots of really meaty issues. One thing that really popped out for me, and I know I've heard it before, but you really put it into good words, and that's the belonging cues. I love that.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Where?
Yeah, look, it's a phrase coined by Dan Coyle, but for us, prior to reading the book, for us it was little and often connections. What are you doing in a little and often fashion to reach out to your team, to let them know you're there and you're available? Now, they may not need you in that given moment, but the fact that they know that you are there and available. And then when we read the Culture Code a couple of years ago, we just thought, wow, what a great way to talk about something that we've been pushing for a very long time, in and around that concept of little and often connections. We sometimes blow up that connection piece to be something more than it is. Little and often wins the race, as opposed to big every 3 months. We want little weekly, okay? And so belonging cues comes from Dan Coyle's The Culture Code.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And I know we had a couple of people jump onto the webinar a little bit after it started, but I really appreciate it, and I want to thank you for your authenticity and your honesty. And you started that your pain, you said this in I think I have the quote, my pain has become my principle.
Purpose. Yeah.
And purpose. And I I'm really seeing a lot of energy around, you know, what it is that you need to do as a leader and be that authentic. Yeah, failure is a great teacher.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for starting that one out. Talk to us a little bit about the Magic 7.
Yeah. So the concept there is just the way you've structured your team. So if we're going to be connected to our individuals in our organisation, the number that the Navy SEALs have researched and that Flight Centre does beautifully through their families and tribes is there'll be one leader for every 6 people. Once that group or team, that location of Flight Centre, for example, expands to say 8 or 9 or 10, they will then bring up another person and they'll split that office into 2 little teams of 5, so that we now keep that ratio quite low, so that we can have strong connections from a leadership perspective to the people that we lead. If we've got 10 or more direct reports and people that we're leading, in our experience and the research, it's too many to forge a strong relationship and help them become the next leader or a potential leader inside the organization. So one leader for every 6. And in these times of adversity, it allows for a deeper connection between people and it doesn't overload the leader. When we've got 10 or 11 people to connect with, we tend to take no action at all or just connect to the 2 or 3 we feel most connected with. When we have 6, it's manageable and we tend to have a good relationship with each of them. It gets severed around 7 and 8, just becomes too many. When it gets to double digits, it's just a bit overwhelming for the leader.
I also think there's a refresh and reform that comes from that. Every time that you regroup with a new and fresh group, is that, again, you revitalize it. It's like cutting a growth, you know, you cut a new growth and new planting.
100%.
I want to go back to, you know, you talked about the colors and the leadership styles, and and everyone has a unique leadership style. And can you talk about what is it that, you know, when people do that self-analysis, self-awareness, so many times they look at, oh, I like that guy, but really they have to look at their own profile to say, what is it that I have to polish in my profile and what should I maybe diminish? Can you talk a little bit about that? Being your best leader.
Yeah, 100%. So what we're looking at here from the wheel there, the blue, red, green, and yellow, these are the characteristic traits that individuals naturally are quite strong at. So if you score and survey a high blue, you'll naturally be good at the process-driven, introverted type of work. Engineers, accountants fall well into that color. And then when you look at your score, whatever's your lowest score is what is most demanding from a neurological energy perspective, okay? So if you've got a high score in blue but a low in yellow, being sociable, talking to people, conducting presentations, networking events will be quite neurologically energy depleting for you, because you'd much prefer to play in the blue space where you're probably behind a computer and you're quite happy just to do your work and not talk to anyone, because you've got lots of neuroenergy for that. So the coaching around that, Ruth Ann, is to really understand yourself and understand what jobs you have to do that are outside or inside your lowest energy. So I'll give them an example. I'm a high yellow. I love the sociable nature of life. I love this work because I get to be with people and build strong relationships with people. My weakness is blue, the precise, deliberate, analytical work. Doing expense reports bores the bum out of me, and I sometimes fall asleep at my desk. But I also know that in the morning, I have the most amount of neuroenergy. I'm a lark, not an owl. So I know if I've got process-driven work to do, I will put my blue work in the morning where I've got high energy. In the afternoon, when I might be socializing with people, I'm fine to be yellow. That's where I want to live. That's where I have the most amount of fun. So understanding how you show up in relation to that's important. But secondly, where do you go to under pressure? If you're a high blue, do you get stuck in the data and you don't make a decision, withholding progress? So understand where you go to under pressure is really important. And often what happens is when we're working with teams and we don't get what we want, or we're not getting the result that we want, we tend to raise the negative traits of our color. So reds tend to get a bit aggressive and overbearing because the team is not making a decision and moving fast enough. The blues, the information, there's not enough information and we get stuck and we don't progress because they get stuck in the data. Greens avoid conflict. So rather than step up and take a bit more assertion, they start to just wait and hopefully things will go away. And us yellows, we start to get a bit crazy and hasty and move too fast. So the training around that and the coaching often is, have a look at your cross. If you're getting too excitable and crazy as a yellow, look at the positives of the blue. You probably need to sit down, slow down, be a bit more deliberate. And if you're working with the team, get accuracy, right? And slow down to their pace. Same with red. Look at what the beautiful greens bring to the group. Become more encouraging and caring. Slow down as well because you're probably raising your red negative energies. So understanding where you go to under pressure, that you raise your negatives, and that does not usually help what you want to get out of the situation. What helps is looking at the opposite color or your lowest color for direction.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so moving back and forth and across and knowing where your team is at as well and I know you did a good example. We are just about down to the end of the hour here, and I want to remind everyone that this has been recorded and we will be including the collateral that Emile has referenced several times will be attached to the recording so that everyone can go into it and look at some of those great new habits to identify and to create more purpose and more passion in your life and create that better leader as well. So please check back on the Deeper Insights webinar series for this recording. And for those of you that would like a little deeper dive, as I said, what Emile you presented was so rich and there was many, many good buckets of information that you presented well. Emile's going to be one of our Tech Canada speakers, and so book him for a 3-hour, 2-hour session and do a deep dive into some of these areas with him. So thank you again, Emile, for joining us, and thank you to everyone on the line, and to everyone, have a wonderful week. What's left of it, we're diving into the weekend. Take care.